Hi everyone. Very happy to introduce T G Campbell. So excited about this chat. Um, do you want to start us off with an introduction to yourself and your books?
Okay, so I'm T G Campbell. I write a series of crime books called about the Bow Street Society. So the Bow Street Society is a group of amateur detectives who operate in Victorian London, and each member of the society has a normal job in addition to being a detective. So you've got a doctor, illusionist, artist, architect, and basically they use their skills and knowledge from their ordinary jobs to then solve the cases that the society's been asked to look into. They're assigned cases by Miss Becca Trent, who's the clerk of the society. So depending on what kind of case they get, depends on who gets called in. So first of all, most people sort of know me in this group from when I was in the criminal shorts chat anthology. So, but then the first book in my series is the Case of the Killer's Client, and there's currently 6 books in the series. The most recent one, which I can find in the bottom of my pile here, which is just a proof, whereas the Case of the Pugilist Ploy came out on Monday in ebook, and the paperback should be out in the next couple of days. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Sam said hi. Hi
Hello.
to you.
Hello. Oh yeah. I can see all the people on the side, yeah. Hello.
The Criminal Shorts anthology was what introduced me to you.
Yeah, I think most people sort of discovered me through that in this group, through the short story anthologies. But yeah, that was such a great anthology to be in. And I went to the Books on the Beach event in Blackpool in August, and I had some copies of the anthology, and it proved really, really popular. So basically, it sold out within in the morning, basically of that. So that was pretty good. But I really enjoyed sort of writing the short story for that. And it's just been really, great honour to be part of the anthology, part of so many other other authors who are so talented. So I was really really chuffed. Did a little dance when I was told I got into it. So glad I got into that.
It is a really good anthology, but
Yeah.
it proves the value of those kind of anthologies as well, doesn't it? That you sort of go and discover new authors from it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you can sort of dip in and out, and you discover new authors, and then go and read the books from that. Yeah, so yeah.
Or in my case, win all the books in our charity auction.
Oh yeah.
But I sort of I aim to win those ones because I'd read the story.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
super excited. Very happy that there's another one coming out as well. So what happens, without giving away too many spoilers for anyone who's new to the series, what happens in book 6? Or me, actually, because I've not read book 6 yet.
So book 6, each book in the series has sort of a theme. So like in the first one, it was sort of put me in a locked room, sort of mystery. Second one was all about department stores and shopping. The third one's more supernatural, which the one you just read. The Toxic Tonic, the fifth one, and the fourth one, so it is a hotel. The fifth one is more about sort of in the society itself. But in the sixth one, we sort of move away from sort of that sort of thing and into the murky world of boxing in the late 19th century. So both bare knuckle and glove boxing. And so basically you've got the two groups. So the people who really love the sort of traditional sort of bare knuckle kind of boxing, and the people who are trying to make the sport more respectable and sort of promote it as more of an art form in the gloved kind of boxing. And basically it's the mystery centers around sort of that world, and basically the conflict within that, and sort of because the people who are the bare knuckle very much were sort of working class, the people who like the glove boxing more sort of upper class, and so they've got the deflections that it's around that as well. But each group has their own little the bare knuckle one has a pub, so they do their bare knuckle fights in the basement of the pub, whereas the gloved kind have like a proper gymnasium and it's upstairs in the pub. So it's sort of two different worlds basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Much like the two kinds of rugby.
Yeah. Yeah. So, boxing had always been illegal, but towards the late 19th century, it was being more enforced, and it was very, very much sort of going out of favour. So the people who had been doing the bare knuckle kind were trying to make it more respectable, trying to make it more accepted. So I had a really good reference book by Billy Edwards. It's his illustrated training manual that was originally published in 1888. And so he actually originally started out as a bare knuckle boxer and then made a transition into gloved boxing. And so that's really interesting because he's coming from both sides. So he's very much sort of trying to sort of present it as sort of the manly art, and how to be. It's more of a science, and how it's also a very good way to stay fit. And it says got instruction how to diet and how to do the exercises, also the different rules. So it's just really interesting, the culture around boxing in general, just sort of really interesting. But we've also got the slang and the terminology used. So basically, just it gives really good opportunity to explore that world, but also because some of the characters that recur in the main series, so you've got Mr. Sam Snyder, who's a cabman for the society. He was a bare knuckle boxer when he was younger, and you've also got Inspector Conway, who's the more sort of established sort of police character in the series. He's also a bare knuckle boxer in a former life, so it also gives opportunity to sort of explore their backgrounds a bit more. But yes, it was just really just to explore that world, and also have sort of more of the sort of not so much seen members actually come into that. So I've got Miss Polly Hicks, who has only sort of really been in like a couple of short stories really, and she's briefly in book one, but she very much sort of takes more of a centre stage role in this one, in the sense that because she's a barmaid, she can go undercover at one of the pubs. So actually it's more, getting more involved with the more lesser known characters as well.
That's good. So do we see Sam the cabman a little bit more in?
Yes. Sam very much brings to the fore his knowledge of sort of the bare knuckle boxing and his youth when he used to do that himself, and sort of the culture around that, and also the tendency of like people to go out to the countryside on the trains to go and see the bare knuckle fights in the fields. But then also at the same time, we've got the contrast of that with Mr. Elliot, who brings in like the illegal side and how stuff like the Railways Act had sort of tried to stamp out that activity of going out to the countryside to go and watch the fights. So it's good to, as I say, to bring, because Sam's also quite working class as well, so he could quite easily, he's quite known to like the fancies they called them back then, so he can actually sort of move in that world and people know who he is from that as well. So it's again sort of drawn upon, because they're ordinary people with like who have like connections to these different like groups and everything. They can more easily move around them and to be more like integrated with them, rather than the police people a bit more wary of the police. So it is quite good to be able to like, it's sort of easy to sort of slip those public, members of the public into those sort of scenarios.
I have to admit, Sam, after the case of the spectral shot, is like slowly sneaking into my list of the favourites.
Oh, good.
I'm a big fan of him. He's great.
Yeah. Because he has to go at the beginning of the spectral shot, doesn't he? He gets assigned to go find out what's actually the crack is. And so he's sent off to Hampstead Heath in the middle of the night with Inspector Conway, who's basically trudging through the dark. And then they have the carriage coming along, don't they, with with the lamps, and then they basically get took away to God knows where, basically. Yeah. So Sam he pretty much appears in all books. I think people quite like Sam because he is sort of that lovable character. And it's good because I think initially was very much just the driver and a bit more peripheral character, but I think as it goes on, you get see more of him and get more of his life.
He has more of a relationship with the other characters as well, doesn't he? Like, I'm thinking there's like a really nice scene in like book 3 with him, and like one of the other ones where he's sort of a bit of a kind of father figure almost.
Yeah, he's very much a Miss Dexter, the artist. She's the youngest member of the society, only 18. So he very much has taken her under his wing and say like a father figure. He has got 5 daughters of his own, so obviously helps. But yeah, he also at the same time with Miss Trent, he's very much, almost like a protector, and he'll be there to look out for her as well. She's a bit more stronger character, a bit more confident, but he is very much sort of still likes to see himself as that father figure with them.
What I like about this, and all of it, I think, is that you created such a rich world of them, and you seem to know so much about all of the characters. Like, you just added in about Sam having 5 daughters, and I don't think that's come up, or it's not come up in any of the bits I've read so far.
Yeah, it does come. I think possibly in the next book, but yeah. But okay, because when I create a character, I also do a character profile for each character, so I know like the date of birth, I know who the family was, where they were born, what their occupation is. Even stuff like that I might necessarily never put in, I will know generally what their backstory is. So Dr. Weeks, there's a lot of Dr. Weeks' past which you not necessarily haven't come across yet, but I have actually planned out. So like as well, Dr. Weeks, he's obviously got his dead room, but you never necessarily have found out where that dead room actually is. But in my mind, I know I have sort of planned that where I know where it actually is. But so I think it's quite good to sort of have that kind of level of detail, because I feel like I said to I was talking to Donna the other day, Donna Moffat, and saying that it's important for your character to feel like real people, because when they feel real to you, they'll then feel real to your reader. And I think when they just stay as like fictional, entities, then you can only go so far in terms of actually trying to make them feel realistic to other people. So it is weird, because when I'm in the zone, it does feel like I always feel like I'm more like retelling a story that's already happened rather than creating a story from scratch. If that makes sense.
Yeah,
You get
no, it does.
so engrossed in the world and so engrossed in that time and all the locations and say the characters, that it just feels like more that I'm just retelling something that's already happened.
You have a character guide that's downloadable as well, don't you?
Yes, I have. Oh wait a minute, I've got. Oh. So this is the actual character guide that this is the A5 copy of it that I took to the Books on the Beach event, but I've done an ebook of it. So it's got just an example. So it's got like that's Lady Alston. It's got like old silhouettes of the different characters in there. You've got sort of a description of them with their like memorable quotes, things on there. And so this is on the website, but in this particular guide, you do have the 4 police characters whose artwork and sort of descriptions isn't actually on the website. So that's exclusive to the ebook and to the paper, the booklet. So people can order a signed copy of the physical ones if they want to. And basically, that's literally for the price of postage. So if you want to email me, they can get that sent out to people. Or so at the moment, the ebook of the character guide for today is free to download, as well as the 5th book, which is the case of the Maxwell murder. That for today, just to mark the release of the Pugilist Poi. But again, just because people think they find it quite good to have that character guide just to dip in and out of. If you're a fan of the series, it's good to see kind of generally what they look like without actually. I didn't want to show their faces because people always have an idea in their mind of what a character looks like. So I wanted to give more of a general idea of what they look like rather than actually giving them the actual face. And also people who are just new to the series, it's quite a good guide just to, if you're not quite sure who somebody is, just to quickly dip in and just remind yourself basically.
Who made the silhouettes?
So that was by Peter. So Peter Spells is the illustrator who I use for all the artwork on all my books. He's a really talented artist who lives down in Brighton. He's a freelance artist. So he basically did all the art. There's 18, I think, altogether. All the silhouettes for me. So that's all original artwork. It took us a while to sort of get it down to the point where we were actually, we were happy with it. But he's really patient though, because I always have to have several changes, and he is really patient, but he's really good, and he sort of developed a particular style for the series, for the illustrations, so that you can always recognise that kind of style that on the book's cover. So I was quite keen to make sure it's more unique. But he's really good, and so he's basically he does all the cover artwork, illustrations, and also the silhouettes and anything else really that I need doing. He's really good.
So I've got a tricky question for you now. Based on your character guide, because you said you know all their date of birth, how many of them have a birthday in December?
Oh, yeah, now you put them on the spot. I think it's only a couple that have. I can't remember which one now. They say them don't know their date of birth, but I do try to spread out their birthdays. I think Dr. Weeks actually. I think his birthday's in December. I think his birthday's the 12th of December. But I try to spread out their birthdays across the year, just because people will not still have the same birthdays in the same month. But that's handy to know in terms of obviously their age and everything, because the books do move forward in time as you go through. So even though we're on book 6, it's only just now moving into 1897. So a lot's happened in that, because the first book starts in January 1896. So it's only been a year in terms of up to book 6. So it's lots happened in that, but yeah.
Yeah, lots has happened, hasn't it?
Yeah. So.
Donna said hello. So
hello.
After interviewing you already.
Oh yeah. I thought it was really fun to interview.
What did she ask you? Because she's famed for doing a tricky question. What was her trickiest question that she asked you?
I think one of the trickiest questions was I don't know, it was one of the questions that I actually remember was her saying, which character did you find the hardest to write for? And I said Inspector Conway, because even though Inspector Conway is my favourite character, he's very much guarded. Sometimes it is like getting blood from a stone, but that's because that's the kind of person he is. He's not very emotional, doesn't show like his emotions that often. Sometimes it's a bit like, just give me something, you know. But yeah, so yeah.
So how many more books have you got planned?
So basically there's a main plot that runs throughout the whole series. So you've got that's the main overarching plot line, and you have a couple of subplot lines, but the main plot line will last for a total of 10 books. So we're just over halfway now through the main 10-book series. Um, I know what's going to happen to get to book 10. After that, I don't know what will happen really after that, but I'm damn planning to do a couple of spin-offs. So do like a Beyond Bow Street sort of spin-off series. So because those characters have lives away from being detective, I think it'd be quite interesting to not only sort of explore those lives, but also play around with different genres. So I think I said to Donna basically, so you've got Mr. Verity, who is a spiritualist, retired schoolmaster. I think it'd be quite good to do like a novella with him, because he's a member of the Ghost Hunters Club, which was a real club back in the Victorian era. So it'd be quite interesting to have him like a bit more traditional Gothic ghost story with him, sort of going to investigate a haunted house. You've got Mr. Locke, who is like illusionist, sort of gentleman thief. So it'd be quite interesting to have more of an actiony type one with him. I could see him quite lending himself to a bit of the spy sort of thriller type genre. So that's what I'm planning to do with that. But then I've also got the short story series, which is the Bow Street Started Case book. So at the moment we're on collections 5 of that. But again, my plan is to have another 5 collections of that. So basically, once we get to the end of the 10-book series of this, we'll have also 10 short story collections as well. So quite a lot to do still.
There really is.
Yeah. So, but I mean, technically, because obviously you've got so many different members. I mean, at the moment, I think it's about 15 or so members that you know of. There's a lot more members that she hasn't actually brought in yet. But because you have so many members, there's technically like the spin-offs and where you can go with it is endless. But I also quite like the idea of moving forward in time with one of the spin-offs, and maybe like setting like 1920 to sort of see how like stuff of the Great War would have affected characters. And I also think like Miss Trent would quite fit into quite well into like the 20s really. And so some of the characters will obviously be a little bit older. So it'd be good to see where their lives have moved on. But yeah, I think it's just really just it's endless, really, almost like a blank canvas, really. You could just like literally just pick characters and see where they go. But also I've got main sort of like the main plot line, but also the subplot lines, which again, we'll come to. Basically, by the time we get to book 10, all these little plot lines, the main plot line will be resolved, basically. So if I then carry on beyond book 10, it'll be like a new era, shall we say.
Would you ever be tempted to go sort of more into the future? Maybe like the 40s or something, and see like if any of the children of the Bow Street Society are sort of carrying it on?
Oh yeah, I did actually think about that. We could like a more sort of, so it wasn't in one day, but yeah, I could say 1940, something like where you've got the children which sort of back their parents. But then I'm sort of thinking who out of them would actually have children, because nobody's actually, apart from Sam's got children obviously, but Mr. Heaves got still children. But in terms of like the main sort of core group, nobody's really got children at the moment. So, but I did think that would be quite interesting to see how their children would be compared to their parents, and also to see how the society would then fit into a more like forensically developed world. Because I think the society worked quite well because forensics still very much is infancy. So it'd be quite interesting to see how they would fit into that, and if they would be seen as a bit old-fashioned, really, compared to the advancements of science by that point.
So Andrew Richards has said Conway has a child. Fact.
It's as my friend. He's got basically he loves the bill, and there's obviously the character called Conway in that, and he's convinced himself that he is the descendant of Inspector Conway from my books. So, but at the moment, Conway is very much married to his job. So he'd have to either have a child he didn't know about, or somewhere in the future he would get with somebody, which again is just as unlikely because he literally is married to his job.
Unless you meet someone else who is also married to their job.
I mean, I quite like the idea. at the moment, I quite like the idea of like maybe him sort of maybe try starting a bit of a companionship with Lady Alston because they're similar age. I think she would be a bit more motherly towards him, and I think they could be come quite close and quite it's a bit more of an unusual pair because she's quite upper class. Obviously, he's quite working class, but I think that would be quite an interesting relationship to explore. But at the moment, I've got no plans for him to get any children. Unless somebody just turns on his doorstep and go, oh, by the way, you fathered this child 10 years ago. What? So, yeah.
It could happen.
It could happen, yeah.
Donna has said that she loves the idea. I don't know what idea she loves. Donna, tell us which one. The one of writing them so far in the future or the children taking over?
Yeah.
They're all going to have children now. You do.
Oh, yeah, yeah. But I think, like, but I did actually thought of toy the idea of possibly like having somebody a bit even more further into the future, but modern day almost, to sort of like maybe a story and looking back into the history and like, oh, here are this group of detectives, and sort of maybe like then connected to a modern day case, or have some kind of like a form of that society, or even have somebody else who's like a descendant, maybe Miss Trent or somebody like one of the key characters who has actually like sort of written their own books about society or something like that, So again, that's sort of another idea that I've toyed with.
Have you, and I don't believe I'm going to ask this question, but have you thought about writing anything that isn't Bow Street Society related?
Well, when I was 16, I wrote the first mystery novella I wrote was for my friend's 16th birthday, and that was actually set between the wars, 1920s, 1930s, and it was about two detectives, Michael and Malcolm. So basically, I thought maybe that I might revisit that potentially in the future. But at the moment, I still can't see myself necessarily writing anything else other than Bow Society. Even if I was going to go more down, like, the sole, like, lone detective, I would almost still see myself writing about Conway in his cases as a police officer rather than in part of the society. So at the moment, it is very much just, I'm just stuck in Victorian England, really, at the moment.
And would you always write kind of historical fiction, do you think?
I think so. I've just really I mean, I loved Av Christie growing up. I really love Raymond Chandler. So, I mean, that's another possibility. I've considered maybe just going the completely other extreme and doing more hard boiled LA sort of American type crime fiction, but still set in like the 1940s. I just think I just love those two eras. I just think it's so distinct and just it's a pretty different world, but I still think there's enough modern aspects that you can still relate to it. And ultimately, human nature doesn't change no matter what period you're writing in.
And you're sort of good on the research, aren't you? So you were talking to me about knowing people at different police museums around the country.
Yes. Yeah, so I've on my blog I have something called the Coffee of a Curator, which I sort of started during lockdown. So on that I interviewed Jennifer Canavar, who was the curator for the Bow Street Police Museum. I've also spoken to Corinne Brazier, I think I can't remember. Sorry if I mispronounce your surname, but yeah, she does the West Midlands Police Museum. I've also spoken to the curator at the Devonshire Police Museum and the archivist at the Leicestershire Police Museum. And I recently interviewed a historian who's researched the origins and the development of the Kent Constabulary, particularly Tunbridge. So I love police history and how it's developed and also the culture of the police. I always wanted to be a police officer when I was younger, but because I've got an eye condition, means I can't actually join the police. So that I sort of said, well, why not write about the police instead then? So that just fascinates. I've actually been to the lockup in Birmingham. That's really interesting. Also, I've been to the Bow Street Police Museum in London. That's also really good. I know the Metropolitan Police Heritage Centre, who've also interviewed their heritage manager. They're opening a new location next year, which they're incorporating, I believe, the Crime Museum with their current collection. So that should be really interesting. But generally, I do like to try to research the period, but also like locations within the period. So wherever possible, I'll get like floor plans. I was saying to Donna that for book 6, I spoke to the curator of the collection at the Royal British Architects Society, and basically she gave me photographs of the original floor plans of Scotland Yard buildings. So they've got the ground floor and first floor of the first Norman Shore building. Because when I'm writing, there was only the one building, and they were just starting the construction of the neighbouring one. So when Conway's walking through the building, the offices he sees, the corridors he moves through, actually would have been on the plans and would have been how they were back in 1896. So yeah, I've got a wide variety of reference books on various subjects.
Which is marvellous. Mills has said she thinks this chat has just sorted a Christmas present dilemma out.
Ooh, thank you very
Which
much.
is good. If that means you're going to buy books, Mills. TG's the Bow Street books were my #1 read of the year last year, joint with Witness X.
Oh yeah, thank you very much. I couldn't believe that. I was so happy about that. Thank
Did
you.
not separate them out. I just made a joint first
Yeah.
and posted.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that.
They're very, very well deserved. I absolutely adore them. The only reason I am only still on book 4, which is here,
Yeah.
is because I read so much for the author chats.
Yeah, yeah. Oh no, that's fair enough. You know, definitely.
So occasionally things get bumped down the list because we need to read something else. But otherwise, I would have read all of them by now.
Yeah.
And
I'm really looking forward to what you think about book 5 because everybody's read the book 5 like, oh, you know, especially
I
because it.
know I'm desperate to get to it because it's like the title sort of tells you that it's about like a character who's quite
Key in the society, yeah.
key in the society. So I'm very intrigued.
Yeah. Because when I was doing a podcast, I had 2 readers on the podcast, and we did the me and Richard, who's Andrew in the chat. We did like a review of the title, and they're like, "Oh, oh, well, oh no, it can't be that character. It can't be that character. Surely, like, well, I can't tell you, but no, 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 it can't be that character."
Yeah, Andrew, I think, has just commented and said that I've got the physical book. I've got all the physical books until I'm waiting for book 6 to come out in paperback, and then I will have all the physical books.
Yeah,
Book 5 is awesome.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, so yeah, I've literally pressed like submit to the paperback of the book 6 today to Amazon. So that hopefully that'll be approved by Amazon in the next couple of days. So that'll be released, but I'll do an announcement on social media of that. If people want to find out or keep informed about the news about the society, I do have a monthly newsletter, the Gaslight Gazette, which I have like obviously news about the books, but also I serialise short stories. We have slang word of the month, an authentic recipe as well, and just general sort of recommendations, anything that I've come across like museums, websites, other books, TV, films, that sort of thing that I think people might be interested in. So you can go to the website and just subscribe from there if they want to.
Andrew, I think, has said so is 6. Awesome.
Oh, good.
I'm
Yeah.
guessing.
He's one of my beta readers.
Donna says that she has all of them signed except book 6.
Yeah.
And she met you in the process. I am excited because I get to meet you in the flesh next year.
Oh yeah.
Event.
Oh yeah, the UK Crime Book Club live event. Yeah.
Yes, and you can sign my book 6 there.
Oh yeah, we'll do. Yeah. That's going to be nerve-wracking, but also very exciting to be on that panel.
No, I think it is going to be. It's scary for us, and we're just organising it. So you guys that are coming to be on the panels.
Oh yeah. Oh no, but it's really lovely there in the group, so I'm sure it'll be a blast. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be really friendly and nice, and Leeds is a good place to visit.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
She says, no, no way influenced by the fact that I live in the city.
Oh no, of course no, not biased at all, no.
No, biased in any way whatsoever. So we've talked about you only wanting to write kind of historical fiction. Do you read a lot of historical fiction?
It's really weird because when I'm writing, I try to avoid books of the same period because I end up, well, you always end up inevitably comparing yourself to other writers anyway. But what tends to happen is I'll read something like, oh, did I get that fact right? And I'm like, and then I have to go and research it and then think, oh, you know, and I have a panic moment. But I generally also don't want to be like subconsciously influenced by anything that I'm reading in terms of like their plots, their characters. But I generally just read a lot of non-fiction stuff. But I do really like so John Bainbridge has got a really good a 3-book series it's about William Quest. It's a thriller, but it's set in the 19th century, so that's really good. His wife Anne Bainbridge has got her own series, Inspector Abbs series. That's brilliant. So her character starts off called Seaside Morning, and then the one that she's recently released that covers spiritualism. I can't remember what it's called now, they're top of my head, but he's just gone to Scotland Yard. So it was interesting to sort of see because her book's set in the 1870s and mine's book's set in the 1890s. So it's quite good to sort of see how things compare sort of in a bit just a few decades before. And I talk to her quite regularly. So it's quite good to exchange as well, like sources that we found and that sort of thing. So but yeah, generally it is mainly a weird and wide variety of non-fiction. But I say, like, I've got the boxing book, also sort of dictionaries that I've got for like the slang. I've also got a replica a textbook on how to do a post-mortem from the 1870s. So it tells you how to prepare for the post-mortem, what tools to use, what to look for. So a lot of that is, the time was taken up just reading those books, really.
Emil said it. She read the synopsis. It's 1,000,000% up her yard owner street.
Oh, good.
Which is very good.
Oh, good.
Donna's being very nice about me and Sam, which is very kind of you. So what is we are recording our top 10 favourite books of the year tomorrow.
Ooh.
Believe it or not. So, and my list is changing as we speak.
Oh yeah, I bet it's constantly shifting, yeah.
No, it is. And I thought I had mine locked down, and then the book I am reading at the moment, I've not finished yet, but is 100% a contender to be on the list. And I'm like, no, what will I take off?
Oh god, I must have just joint entries again. Sneak in 20 rather than 10.
We were talking about that, but then we were like, but we still not have enough room.
You should have honorary mentions. So you get to like number 1, and then you split between important 2 and 1 and honorary mentions.
I've got about 4 honourable mentions. But yeah, and none of them were any of this book I'm reading, and that might go on. But yeah, we're the same. We have no idea how we're going to do 10. Sam's changing as she speaks. But my favourite question, which is where I was going to with this before I got derailed by talking about my list, is I've been asking everyone is what's been your favourite reads of the year?
I say, unsurprisingly, is that because I started planning this book back in January, so I'm literally writing this book all year. So I've literally been doing research for all the year through. But I think one of my most favourite books this year has been Billy Edwards' Art of Boxing Training Manual Illustrated, because it's just so encompassing. It covers everything. And also it's fascinating to read that the rules, like the prize fight rules, also the sort of the Queensberry rules, and just his attitude. And it definitely gives you a glimpse into his attitude as a boxer from both bare knuckle and glove, but also the attitudes of society at the time. So definitely that's been a really good read. Also, oh god, there's so many I've read. I've started reading The Head in the Ice, which is a fiction book by Richard James, I think, and that's really good. So that's Bowman of the Yard. So he starts off where his inspector starts with an asylum, and then he comes out, and basically he has to pick up his life, basically. So I'm reading that at the moment. That's really good, and just so many other books, really. So, but yeah, they're my 2 sort of main top reads that I've read this year.
Donna doesn't think she can do a top 10 either. Donna, no, I haven't got a top 10. I'm debating sneaking in the book I'm reading now and making it joint with something that had bumped off my list.
Oh.
Which would be a cheat, because then I'd have 11 in my top 10.
we technically had 11 last year, so I can't really say anything.
I don't know. I had 10 last year, I think. I just had a joint number 1.
Yeah.
So I was like, I can't pick like which book I liked best out of the 2.
Yeah, we just should have included both of them then. Just has to be done.
Just have to have. Like I just have to have a joint number 1. I'm just
yeah. Why not?
And like the good news is, and Donna knows this, like once you get that and find like the book you really like, you just tell everyone, and then people eventually buy it to shut you up.
Yeah.
Donna's going to agree to this because she bought one of my favourite books of the year, because I kept banging on about it. So I have just bought it to shut you up.
Yeah, because when you really love a book, it comes alive and you just can't stop thinking about it. Those are the best books where actually another book I actually read this year called In the Dark Places. It's a novella, but it's sort of in the style of a 1970s horror movie. So it's all about the shadows coming alive in this forest, and that's really good. But that's sort of, I read it quite quickly, but it's just one of those books that just stays with you afterwards. You just find yourself thinking about it, like, oh, you know. So yeah.
It's yeah. I mean that's the good thing about the society, isn't it? Because as the cases change, the people in it change, and sometimes you're reading it wondering about what's happening to the ones that aren't.
Oh, the ones that aren't, yeah, they're just like, yeah, well, what happened to, because Mr. Heath's only been in the first one, I think. I can't remember now. Yeah, so he's just been in the Curious Client, but he's been in a few short stories. But yeah, but it just makes you wonder sort of where what this. I always think about like what would my character be doing at Christmas? And sort of like, who would they be spending family? Would they be doing like just on their own? Would they be working? Um, but yeah, people do. And also, it's interesting how people sort of find a particular character as their favourite, which you wouldn't necessarily expect that. So a lot of people said to me that Inspector Conway is their favourite character, which he'd never been. He was never intended to be sort of a main sort of character, but he just ended up just wangling his way in there. But also, like when I love it when your characters decide to do things they didn't expect as well, like Mr. Maxwell, Miss Dexter, their sort of will they, won't they romance was never in the original plan, but just when the first book, when they get in the carriage and he accidentally touches the hand, she's like, oh, and he's like, oh, okay, that's going to happen. And okay, then right, okay, we'll go with this, see what happens.
That's kind of interesting. You hear a lot of authors say that, like the characters, they start off with a plan and then the characters kind of take them a certain way as well. I
Yeah,
can see why people like Conway.
yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's because I think with Conway, he's got to be sort of. I don't want to give too much away with that main plot, but basically, yeah. So he's very much the go between sort of the police and the society. And I think people quite like him because he is loyal to both, and you can see the conflict, but also he is the embodiment of like sort of police work and being say man to his job, and he is very much an honourable man, and he'll always do what he thinks is right. Um, and so in book 5, you do get this few flashbacks. You do get to learn about his past and how he became a policeman, and actually how he became involved in society as well. And people just generally, yeah, you know, have warmed to him really, and so I've warmed to him as well. But in terms of like, it's for me most of the time, it's because I have obviously meetings in the books where they'll discuss the cases and what clues they've come across, and normally it's someone go, oh, what about this? I'm like, oh, I didn't think about that, but okay, yes, we'll still go with that and we'll investigate that and we'll see what happens with that. But yeah, sometimes it is like it just completely comes out of left field and you're thinking, okay, now we'll go. I still want to get from like here to there, but I'm going to have to go all the way that way in order to actually make it so the actual character does what they would normally do, really. Because I think it's the point where you could try to force it, but the characters, I think when you get to the point with the series where you've so far and you wrote about them so much that they do become real people, and you almost on an instinctual level, you know they just wouldn't say that or wouldn't do something. So you have to basically just roll with it.
So is there an aspect of like kind of life or the culture in that era that you've not written about yet that you really, really want to include?
I really want to sort of like to cover the issue of sort of like racism in that era. I think that's an issue I haven't covered at all, but I'm very conscious that I want to do it in a respectful way, and I need to have. I really want to sort of have, because the society is tended to be representative of society as a whole. It's meant to have all classes, all genders, all races, and I think at the moment we haven't quite covered all races at the moment. So I would like to have a bit more ethnic diversity within the society, but also at the same time, I'm also conscious that I don't want to be falling into stereotypes. I want to make sure I get those aspects right. But also, what I always like to do is right from the point of view like these various parts of somebody's personality should just be incidental. It's like, oh, you just happen to be homosexual. You just happen, it's not that's not what the only thing they're known by. We're all complex beings, and it should always be you see the person first and anything else later on. Do you know what I mean? So that's what I'm very conscious of, making sure that anybody I bring in for whatever reason is a rounded character and a rounded person. So I do have a idea for an ethnic character who again their ethnicity will just be incidental, but I want to make sure I bring them in for like all the other characters. They're there for their job and their knowledge. They're not there because of where they're from basically. So I will want to try to include that in the next book or so. But yeah, that's definitely an area that I want to cover, but I'm just want to make sure I cover it in the right way.
Makes sense. So you've talked about Andrew being one of your beta readers.
Yes.
Who reads your novels first?
So basically what happens is obviously I obviously write them, and then I have a team of beta readers. So I have 4 beta readers who Andrew obviously he's read all of them. So they get the next draft. They normally get it for about a month. I give them sort of headings. It's normally quite sort of broad headings like plot. Does it run? Is it consistent? And then like characters, is the characters consistent with past books? And descriptions, because I was conscious that I can be over descriptive. And then they will go away, read the books, make notes, and they'll give me their feedback. And then what I normally do is I do a 1-to-1 with them, and then basically interrogate the life out of them, ask different questions. What do they think about this character, that character, about this? And then will then adjust the books based upon their feedback. And they've been completely like so invaluable. They're really honest as well. They're not afraid to sort of say, well, this didn't work and I didn't like this bit. And it has really helped me to bring the standard up of the books. And then once they've read it, I've done the like changes based on that, and then goes to the editor. So
that is quite a thorough beta reading process.
yeah.
I've never been interrogated by someone 1-to-1 who I've beta read for. That's quite.
Yeah, because I mean, I normally have questions when I'm writing. There's the issues. I like to take a bit of risk with the character, so I'd always think, would this? I think the character possibly would do it, but I'm not entirely sure. So I just make a note of that question, and then when it comes to the beta reading process, I'll say to them, "Well, what do you think? Do you think that actually?" And I go, "Well, yeah, I can see the character doing it, but maybe not for that reason." And also it's like the motive for book 5. It made sense to me, but they said, "Oh, it just needs a bit fleshed out a bit more. It just needs to be a bit more developed, so it's just a bit more realistic, basically." So again, it was that helped me sort of move that up a level. But I think also it's good to have that like second or say 4 pairs of eyes to sort of look at it, especially if they've read the rest of the series. They'll stand out to them like a mile if a character's completely not doing what they're supposed to, what they normally would do. And also each beta reader brings something different. So they always look for different things. Like one of them will always look for overuse of certain colours. She goes, too much green, there's too much brown, too much armography, and people doing too much after their arms, So and well, somebody else will maybe look more at the characters and how they developed, and particular scenes, and so yeah, it really is just between the 4 of them, they cover all bases basically.
That's brilliant. And Andrew, I think it's just coming up as Facebook user, so I'm guessing. Has said also you genuinely listen to the feedback.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, because sometimes, well, actually most of the time, they'll come up with stuff that I don't even consider, and when we discuss things, you go, actually, yeah, that's a really good idea, or that makes sense, and but also sometimes there's also just that a little bit of validation of actually, yeah, you are on the right lines, or did you have that, the reaction that you want the readers to have, and they have, they confirm that they've had that reaction. So it is definitely, it's such an invaluable process to have those beta readers, and honestly, they're just worth their weight in gold.
If they're useful. I have
Yes.
a book on my I have a book on my top 10 list that I beta read, and I feel like I was the world's worst beta reader for it because all my feedback was just, I love this, write more.
Yeah. Yeah, but sometimes that's good as well.
Like there's nothing wrong. I found like one tiny thing that I would like more of, but most of it was just like, no, just stop talking to me and let me keep reading.
Yeah, what I quite like to do when I get, because I don't share each beta reader's feedback with the others. I mean, in the past we have done a Zoom call, and I've just done general points, like this is the common themes that people come up with. So then interested to sort of talk to people on a 1-to-1 basis. So, what do you sort of bring up somebody else might have mentioned, and sort of see what their take is of it, and if they agree, or if they don't agree, and just see like whether they think that would work or not. So it is good to. I do think you do need to have that bit more, that chat level after you've had that initial feedback, because then 9 times out of 10 the beta readers will think, or I'll point out stuff the beta readers hadn't actually thought about, but actually when you point it out, they're like, oh, we actually, now that you've said that actually I do think that needs changing. So it's quite a good process to do it that way.
So you talked about your short story collections. Do they link in between the sort of main cases in the story, like, or do they feed into them in any way? Or
so the short stories are standalones, in the sense that there's the main plots don't necessarily feature in the short stories, but they have the same members come into short stories. Normally it's like 2 or 3 members are assigned, but also the short stories don't have any murders in them. that's like a rule of thumb. So it's a bit more of the unusual sort of quirky puzzles. Like one of the short stories is a lady is getting blackmailed because this con man came to her house, was alone with her in her study, and he took a teacup with him, and he's basically saying, well, shit, we got up to some naughty business, and she's like, no, we didn't. Yeah, so basically he's threatening to take this teacup as proof to her husband that she's basically been unfaithful, and so he's blackmailing her not to do that. So it's like so those sort of more sort of not necessarily a crime, but just a problem that they're approached by that couldn't necessarily be converted into a main novel, but it's quite interesting plot line to do it. It also just gives you an opportunity to try out different parents as well. So I found that Dr. Rip Alexander, who is the veterinary surgeon, he's been a few times where he's worked quite closely with Mr. Skinner, the bodyguard, the one-handed bodyguard, who's in the spectral shot, who's the gun expert. So even though you think they wouldn't necessarily fit quite well together, they've actually been quite a couple of times when their chemistry has been quite good. But in terms of the timeline, so most of the short stories at the moment happen sort of over summer, begin the winter in 1896, whereas the first books happens in January, second book is February, third book's October. So you've got sort of like the short stories in between that, and then you've got like November, December, and in December again, and then you've got just one short stories at Christmas. So it's all they just basically happen around or in between the main book series.
Are you tempted to submit any more for different anthologies after the success of Criminal Shorts?
Well, I have actually submitted a short story because I'm at the Birmingham event next year that Donna's Moffat's actually sponsoring. So that's the Author City event. So they're doing an anthology. I have submitted a short story for that anthology because I've discovered that there's 32 Bow Streets in the UK. So I thought, would it be really interesting if Miss Trent was called to Birmingham, to the Birmingham Bow Street. So basically what happens is she goes to this brick factory, and there's three guys there who basically formed their own version of the Bow Street Society, but in Birmingham. And they basically taken on a case which is a bit too complex for them, and they need the help of the London group. So she has to then pull in some members from London to help them solve the case. But I'm not quite happy with the solution of that, so I just need to revisit that a little bit. But that was really interesting to research, because a lot of the places that I feature in that book now don't exist anymore. But again, I was quite keen to try to use real places from Birmingham and try to sort of show Birmingham as it was back in 1896. That was really interesting. But I always try to, if I'm going to do an anthology, I do try to sort of like make sure that that's going to be a good fit within the sort of short story, and also with that the general wider anthology as well, so make sure it's sort of appropriate sort of in the anthology as well. Yeah, but so basically, whenever such opportunities come along, I also consider doing anthologies. I do like enjoy doing anthologies. Like I say, it's a good way for people to like discover the books. But also, it's sometimes it's just good to spread your wings a little bit, and also because with the Birmingham one, I wouldn't necessarily have actually considered putting them in that setting. So again, it sort of challenges you to sort of consider different avenues. And because like in the third, but they do go to Brighton, so they have travelled. But I thought it was just interesting to see, if what would happen if like another sort of group, sort of like copycat group, sort of set up, and they just basically need the help of the London group. So that's basically the premise for that.
Is that the Tales on Trent event?
No, it's the Author City event. That was supposed to happen last year. It was for the Commonwealth Games, or this year, should I say, Commonwealth Games, but had to be rescheduled. So it's in July next year.
Nice.
It's at the Council House. Yeah, so Donna's sponsoring that.
Cool. I know she just helps with the Tales on Trent one as
well.
Yeah. In the Midlands.
Yeah.
So I kept meaning to go to it last year because I used to live in Stoke-on-Trent.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Nice, like journey back down
memory lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say you travel quite a lot around, don't you? Because you've been to Blackpool, you're going to go to Birmingham, you're in Leeds. What other have you got?
Well, so next year I've just got the Leeds event and the Birmingham event. I have in the past, I've been to Bradford, the UK Indie Fest, which unfortunately doesn't happen anymore. But I'm always going to London. I think I'll probably go back to London next year, hopefully talk to see the Metropolitan Police new collections. I hope, fingers crossed, that'd be quite good. But basically anywhere that have been really, almost, anything that any museums. It's mainly museums that attracts me really. I just love old locks. The lockup in Birmingham was fascinating. Police museums, any kind of local police museums. anything that's crime related, I'm there basically, I'm all over it. So also, well, I went recently, I think last year, I went to the London Transport Museum. So that was really interesting. I've also been in the past, I've been to the Old Operating Theatre. I went to the Magic Circle's headquarters when I was first doing my research. That was an interesting experience. Because we had an appointment, we got there early, we knocked on the door and he was like, hello? And like, we're here to see so-and-so. He's not here. And shut the door. I was like, okay, then we'll come back at halfway then. But we had a guided tour of that. So that was really interesting. Had like Houdini stuff in there and all the other magicians. So it was good to see the contemporaries of Percy Locke. And they've got a library in the basement, which has got every single book written about magic ever in this library. And you can go in and make an appointment to go and actually do research in their library. It's amazing.
So while you're visiting us up in Leeds, we have a medical museum and an old Victorian workhouse.
Yes, I know that. Yep.
You'll really enjoy.
Yeah.
There's the Armories, which has a crime exhibition.
I'll be all over that.
And is free to enter. And we also have one of the first medical schools built outside of London.
Oh yeah. Oh, that'd be handy. Yeah, it's definitely the medical ones are definitely one of my favourites. All the specimens and the tools and the
And I don't know if you can go in. It's not kind of a medical school anymore, but it's kind of still in the hospital.
And you okay. Yeah. So
it's owned by the university and is still used for lectures and teaching, but not for medicine.
Yeah, I think there is. I know there is a museum in the UK somewhere which is actually open to the public, which is purely just for like students and people who are in the medical field. So it's a bit like how the crime museum was only for like, trained detectives and police officers. But I think they're incorporating that now into the new collection. So that would be interesting. But I did actually go to a exhibition of the crime museum uncovered at the London Museum a few years ago. That was really interesting because they had some of the exhibits from the world, like more the famous cases, but how those cases played a role in the evolution of forensics and detection. So they had like John George Haig's apron and gas mask that he had, and it had other things, but it had like very much like the emphasis very much on the victims and how it helped crime and policing evolve over time rather than have the emphasis on the killers. So it was a really fascinating exhibition. They had all the original exhibits and evidence they had collected over the years.
Yeah, and I think it's better to look at it that way in a way, isn't it? That these are, rather than sort of glorifying the killers, you're looking at the ways that they were caught and how that has helped people catch more people.
Yeah, I think that's what fascinates me more than actually sort of the crimes. It's actually how they caught them and how like it helps inform like forensics, but not just forensics, but also just police work in general and methods. And it's just so interesting. Just the whole thing. I could honestly just be like, just read about it and watch it and just forever more, really.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely fascinating. And I think how the science of it adapts over time is...
Yeah, definitely. Because when I'm researching, a lot of the sort of the forensic science is sort of starting to emerge, but they're not necessarily, you can't necessarily admit them as evidence in court. So there's always that question of, well, if they use this, could they actually use it as evidence in court? Because I think a lot of them weren't actually admissible until the early 20th century. I mean, Scotland Yard didn't get its fingerprint bureau until the 1900 or 1901. So again, it's sort of, so they could use the science in the sense of, the society could definitely, because they're not actually bound by the police. Dr. Meach could technically, because he doesn't actually work for the police. But again, it's like once you get to that evidence, you couldn't necessarily use that in court. I think it's a really good episode of Ripper Street where Captain Jackson he's got fingerprint evidence of, he knows who the murderer was, but because they can't, it's not admissible as court in evidence as court, they have to let the murderer go. So, but it's a really good illustration of how it is that difference between, yes, the science is there, but could it actually have been used?
So I think a lot of it is like when they started to bring in DNA evidence, isn't it? They needed to sort of come up with a like standard of what is a match.
Yeah.
That could be approved and be reliable. So you might have the science there and you might be able to use it, but unless it's like reliable.
Yeah, that's the difference. Yeah, it's how reliable it is. Yeah. People are just generally wary of anything that's new, don't they, as well? So it's an interesting question.
Yeah, definitely. I quite like sort of the bits that you sneak in about like the medicine and the poisons that you used. And
oh yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, like researching like the tests they would have used to actually to test for like arsenic, and then they're like reading the case studies of like, oh well, yeah, we're confident that this test is 100% reliable, and then they're like, then they started testing corpses. They're like, oh wait a minute, there's arsenic in this corpse, but those corpse wasn't poisoned, so what's happened there? And then they've discovered, oh, arsenic naturally occurs in the body. Oh crap, we've now convicted how many people based on this test? You know, so it's like, is that it? You know, it is that sort of grey area. But I do try, yeah, so try to. That's the thing. I'm very much sort of to a certain extent limited by the realities of the time and also the research. And I have a really good idea for a murder, and they're like, oh, that couldn't have happened because that wasn't around. That hadn't been invented yet, or there's no way they could actually uncover the murderer. So yeah, that is really interesting as well.
So Agatha Christie's books apparently helped cure people from certain types of poisoning.
Oh, okay.
She was like so accurate with how she described them.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of thing's definitely got to try to be as accurate as possible as you can. That's why I say the post-mortem textbook's really interesting and really useful. Because also it's the language that they would have used as well. But so I'm quite very keen. Sort of, if I'm not quite time to I'll try to get several sources to try to to confirm what I've already read. But also, you've got to try to obviously then translate into actually something that people would actually understand as well. So that's why Dr. Wiss is quite good. He's so plain speaking. He wouldn't use Latin words. He can't be doing all that. You know, he'll just quite happy to tell you in basically straight, basically what it is and what what he thinks.
We've got 3 minutes left.
What?
No.
Where'd that go?
I could keep talking to you forever.
No.
Remind everyone of what they're going to go away and buy if they haven't
Okay.
already done so.
Okay.
Where they can get signed copies from, all of that stuff.
So yeah, so basically, if you want, so the ebook of the character guide is on free download at the moment for the rest of the day. Also, you've got the 5th book. If I can find it. Wait a minute. Oh, I've got so many books here. Oh no, that's not it. Oh, so the 5th book, Case of the Maxwell Murder, is also on free download at the moment. The first book, Case of Curious Klein, is the first book of the series. Yeah, that one. Yeah, because it's there's plots of run throughout the whole series. I do recommend that people read the books in order. You can read them on their own, but if you want to get the best experience, it's best to basically in order. So they're all available from Amazon. You search Bow Society. I've got the website bowsociety.com. You've got the newsletter Gaslight Gazette, where you can subscribe to that. And you could basically just keep up to date with what's happening with me. Generally, apart from the so you want a signed copy of the character guide, then just email me at info@bowsociety.com and I can send that out to you just for cost of postage only, because that was given away as a free guide at the event. So basically, I've tried to make that as as accessible as possible, really, for people. But generally, in terms of signed copies, I only sort of tend to just do those at book events or giveaways. Because I like to think that I like to try to do it so it's a bit more special. So when you do get a signed copy, it is really something that's a bit more exclusive. So yeah.
Excellent. And then we know you're quite good at publicising your events, so we will know where to come and get them signed.
Oh, yep. So that's all on the website. There's actually a section called book signings. So you can look at that. And also I've got a monthly blog. So this month's blog is all about the language of boxing in the Victorian era. So slang terms and different phrases to boxing. So if you quite like boxing and history, that's quite a good one to read. But also they've got all the coffee creators on there as well. So you can go back and read all the blogs about the different creators and different museums that I've interviewed as well.
Excellent. And then all that's left to say is thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me again. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.